Coach Powers here, talking about the sharp increase in mental illness during the COVID pandemic. And it's been very sharp. I've been doing a lot of research on this lately. Um, and really, if we step back and look at anecdotally, I think if probably most of us can say we have felt more isolated, lonely, depressed, anxious, trouble sleeping, you know, as of lately, going through this pandemic than probably ever in our life, right? And if not ourselves, we likely know people around us that are going through these problems. People who never ever had anxiety before are having anxiety. People who never had depression before now have depression, sleep problems before, now they're having sleep problems. And it's not just the pandemic and the COVID and the state of that in the country and in that regards, but the state of the country entirely. You turn on the news, you turn on social media, all you see is racism, politics, crime, buildings burning, lies, manipulation, narcissism, negativity. And then COVID. COVID's just right between all of those things. I mean, it's like COVID racism, COVID politics, COVID Trump, COVID Biden, COVID. And it's really become an accelerant to mental illness right now. People are finding themselves isolated for months, stricken with fear, anxiety, worry, the isolation and inability to engage in activities we all rely on to help, increase our quality of life has led to a major increase in depression, anxiety, and sleep problems. As of now, as of the time I'm doing this video, COVID has claimed more than 186,000 people in the United States. And that is significant. That is much higher. I think that's the highest we've seen it since the Spanish flu, right? 100 years or something. I mean, that is significant. It's put 16 million people out of work. That's significant. Schools have been closed. Most sports have been canceled. Restaurants have been closed or now opening at smaller capacity. In a recent poll, 71% of people reported their biggest fears at the moment are concerns for their loved one's health. So 75% of people said they feel like things are out of control. According to a recent study by the University of Phoenix, more than 40% of Americans report feeling lonelier now than they ever have in their entire life. I mean, think about that. 40% lonelier than they ever have in their entire life. That's almost half the country not feeling lonely, which would be incredible enough, but lonelier than they ever have in their entire life. Many people are battling severe stress or even PTSD, a result of perhaps tragically losing loved ones to COVID or dealing with terrible health conditions stemming from the toll COVID has taken on their bodies. Others are finding it increasingly difficult to cope with the stress of the pandemic, which is creating a breeding ground for mental illness again. So more than 35% of Americans report their mental health has worsened during the pandemic, with 43% reporting their emotional well-being had also gotten worse. Prescriptions for anti-anxiety medications, such as benzodiazepines, have risen over 34%. That's incredible. Over 34%. So while prescriptions for antidepressants have increased only over 18%, which is still almost 20%, that's still a significant increase. This comes from the Philadelphia Inquirer back in April. Health experts are putting these numbers much higher in these weeks to come. This statistic comes at the end of July. Now it's September. These numbers are much higher. Again, more than 75% of prescriptions filled in recent months have been new prescriptions. I mean, think of that. 75% of prescriptions filled in recent months have been new prescriptions. That is to say, these are not simply people that already had anxiety or depression or some kind of mental illness that were simply refilling their old scripts. We are seeing a sharp spike in new mental illness prescriptions and mental illness diagnoses. So prior to the COVID pandemic, between the years of 2015 and 2019, we actually had seen around a 12% decrease in anti-anxiety medication. Despite a lot of this talk in the benzodiazepine withdrawal community that benzos are this epidemic growing, it's actually had been going down for a bit, which is good and also contradictory to a lot of doctors that are saying, oh, benzos are pretty safe. Well, then why are the numbers going down? Well, the numbers are going down because we switched to SSRIs as a first line defense against anxiety. Well, why? Oh, well, we discovered that benzos are actually addictive, very difficult to come off, and have long-term problems. Oh, okay. So moving forward, Dr. Michael Leibowitz, I hope I'm saying that right, explains that one of the main reasons we are seeing such a sharp increase in anti-anxiety medications right now instead of antidepressants, which have become more, again, preferred first-line, treatments for anti-anxiety, is that benzodiazepines can work very quickly. Whereas SSRIs or other antidepressants can take 6 to 10 weeks to begin working, and even then, you're not. SSRIs don't typically work as good as benzos. I mean, I'd say 90% of people, if they're having some kind of severe anxiety or stress, you give them a benzo, it works pretty good. Additionally, we are seeing, and it works really quickly, what I mean to say. Additionally, we are seeing a huge increase in individuals using alcohol and marijuana to self-medicate and cope with the stressors of the pandemic. Most of us have probably seen the memes on social media talking about drinking. I mean, they're all over the place. Is it beer 30 yet? Is it wine 30 yet? Hey, it's 11 a.m. I'm drinking wine. It's no surprise that alcohol sales are up more than 34%. Boy, I bet they're loving that, right? 34%. That is incredible. That is incredible. This is quite troubling considering alcohol actually weakens the immune system and can make us more susceptible to COVID. Alcohol does this by suppressing bone marrow, which is where we get our white blood cells from, which the body uses to defend itself against disease. Not only that, but alcohol can slow the function of cells responsible for clearing pathogens from our lungs that line the respiratory tract. For this reason, it is strongly recommended that people practice real caution in their alcohol consumption. People need to drink in moderation. So, quick deviation. What is moderation? Well, in females, moderation is considered consumption of just 1 drink per day and 2 drinks per day for men. That's 1 drink for women, 2 drinks for men. Men are larger, typically. That's about 12 ounces of beer or 5 ounces of wine or 1.5 ounces of distilled spirits. High risk is considered 4 or more drinks per day or 8 drinks per week for women. And for men, 5 drinks on any given day or 15 or more drinks per week. So 7 days in a week. If you're drinking just 2 beers a day, every day, that becomes a problem, obviously. The problem with using alcohol for stress management is that while it initially offers some immediate stress decrease, it later creates more stress for the body. It has the same consequence on sleep. Meaning if you take it, it helps you fall asleep for the first 3 or 4 hours. After that, it's going to really interrupt your sleep. So using alcohol too much can result in the body losing its ability to regulate stress on its own. Because as you probably are aware in my videos, I often talk about benzos being sort of pill form alcohol, or alcohol being liquid benzos. This is quickly how tolerance and even dependence begins to creep up on us. If you had an issue with stress regulation, anxiety, and particularly depression, alcohol definitely increases these things with prolonged use. And it becomes almost like, the pill game where 1 milligram worked for a month, and then by the second, third month, you got to take 2 milligrams, and then by year 3, you're at 10 milligrams, and, and it just gets out of hand. So I'm going to do another video here in a bit on how do we manage anxiety and depression and sleep during this COVID nightmare we've been in, right? But I guess in this video, I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that you're not alone if you are going through this stuff right now, because I've talked to a lot of people and they're is something wrong with me? What's happening? And I have to almost remind them, like, hey, we're in a pandemic. Oh, I've never had anxiety before, or sleep, or should I get on meds, and what do I do? I think just first being aware that we are undergoing something very profound and unusual, unprecedented in this country, in my lifetime anyway. And I imagine most of yours, right? Unless you lived during the Spanish flu. And so some peace of mind could be in the knowledge that what goes up must come down. These numbers are coming down with COVID, and I suspect over the next few months, we're going to see them really, really deteriorate. These numbers really drop. And then I think as the country starts to open up again and things get back to normal, I think we'll see a sort of clearing up of a lot of this stuff, whether it's sleep or anxiety or stress. You'll see it begin to, it'll resolve itself to a certain point. So that's good news. But at the same time, as I always preach in my videos, we can't just sit around and wait for the storm to pass, which is sort of what we're doing with COVID. We're just eating and drinking and binge watching TV, sitting in our house isolated, and we're like, why am I getting fat? Why can't I sleep? Why am I getting more anxious and depressed? Right? So in the next video that I'm going to release, I'm going to just talk about how we can manage anxiety and depression during COVID.